This was the moment everything collapsed for Masumi Hayashi, one of the most shocking serial killers in the history of Japanese justice. On the evening of July 25, 1998, in the Sonobe residential area of Wakayama City, a summer festival was underway. Lanterns lit from 6 p.m., children running all over the yard, adults lining up to get curry from the communal pot, and the sound of laughter and talking echoed throughout the neighborhood. There was nothing to suspect. About 30 to 60 minutes after eating, the first person began to vomit, then the second person, then the third person. In less than an hour, dozens of people collapsed right in the middle of the festival yard, convulsing, suffering from severe abdominal pain, and fainting on the spot. Ambulances rushed to the Sonobe area through the night. 67 people were hospitalized. 4 people did not survive, including 2 children. And the scariest thing was not that 67 people collapsed. The scariest thing was that while the whole neighborhood was panicking, while people were screaming for ambulances, while children were convulsing right before everyone's eyes, there was a woman who was not poisoned at all. Not a single symptom, not a single bout of vomiting. Calm, as if she knew beforehand that she should not touch the curry pot that night. That was because this woman was not just a neighbor of the victims, but was the very person who had put a sufficient amount of poison into their meal, then stood and watched them collapse one by one. And from the testimony of a high school girl, the only person who noticed that woman lingering around the curry pots for more than 40 minutes would be the final thing that exposed the true face of the demon disguised as a neighbor. Masumi Hayashi later became a name known to all of Japan. This sick woman was believed to be behind a series of intentional poisonings spanning many years, all stemming from a motive that, upon hearing it, you would not know whether to be angry or afraid. So who exactly is Masumi Hayashi? Who were her victims? And what was really going on in the sick mind of this woman? Hello everyone. Today we will journey together to Japan, a country I have always wanted to visit, but not for a reason like this. Masumi is a woman with an extremely sick mentality. And when I say sick, I mean a person who believes she can solve all her problems by poisoning the entire neighborhood. I advise everyone to prepare a really strong cup of coffee today, because the deeper this case goes, the scarier it becomes in ways you would not expect. And if you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, please hit subscribe because that really helps the channel a lot. Now grab your coffee and let's begin with me. This is the Masumi Hayashi case. Welcome to Japan. I wish this visit were taking place under slightly less gloomy circumstances, but it seems that is not how this channel operates. Every time I think about making a video about beautiful tourist spots here, about Mount Fuji, about quiet bamboo forests, about a kaseki breakfast by a window overlooking a rock garden, a case like this pulls me back. Japan is usually known for wonderful things. The crime rate is among the lowest in the world. People leave their bicycles unlocked in front of their doors. Wallets dropped on the street are usually picked up and handed over to the police intact, the money inside still completely there. It is no coincidence that this is called one of the safest and most civilized societies on Earth. This is a country where community trust is not something distant. It is the way people live every day. With Japan, this story is particularly heartbreaking because the perpetrator was not a stranger, not a criminal coming from somewhere else. This was a neighbor. Someone who had stood next to the victims at neighborhood meetings, someone whose face and name everyone in the Sonobe area knew. And this case is one of the darkest stories that country has ever had to face. It all began on the morning of July 25, 1998, in the Sonobe residential area, Wakayama City, where Neighborhood Association Number 14, with about 200 members from 69 households, was preparing for their annual summer festival. Lanterns were lit at 6 p.m. Music played, children ran all over the yard. This was a matsuri, a traditional Japanese summer festival, something that any Japanese person grows up with, has memories of, and considers an indispensable part of summer. It was not a big event, just simply an evening where neighbors sat together, old, young, children, entire families pulling each other out to the yard just as they did every year. About 20 women in the area volunteered to cook curry from early morning. They started cooking in the morning. 3 large pots of curry were placed at a garage, and 2 private houses in the area, cooking all day under the July heat. And in the evening it was served to 67 of their neighbors. No one checked, no one suspected. This was food cooked by the very women in the area, with their own hands, for people whose faces and names they knew. Yet out of the 67 people who ate curry that night, 4 people never returned home. The first person was Hirotaka Hayashi, 10 years old. A child who came to the festival with his family, eating curry because it was the food at his neighborhood festival. A 10-year-old child had no choice but to trust the adults around him, and that trust killed the boy. The second person was Miyuki Tori, 16 years old. 16 years old. Summer festival, lanterns, friends. This is the most normal youth memory of any Japanese person. Miyuki went to that festival just like dozens of times before, and never returned. The third person was Takatoshi Tananaka, 64 years old, the president of Neighborhood Association number 14. He was the one who stood up to organize this festival, the person who decided the menu, the person who assigned who cooked what, the person who went to each house to remind neighbors to remember to attend. He had spent that whole day preparing for the party, and he was one of the first people who did not return. The fourth person was Takaaki Tanaka, 53 years old, the vice president of the association, Tanaka's close associate. The two had taken care of the neighborhood together for many years, standing up together to organize evenings like the one that night, and then passing away together. 4 people, 2 children and 2 men who were just trying to organize a fun evening for their neighbors. So who did this, and why? Now, 4 dead people is not the whole story, and this is what I need you to remember. The remaining 63 out of the 67 people who ate curry that day are called survivors, but surviving does not mean they could go back to their previous lives. Acute arsenic poisoning is not something a person's body completely recovers from after a few days in the hospital. It attacks the nervous system, destroys internal organs, leaving sequelae that many of them have to carry for the rest of their lives. Among those 67 people were children, the elderly, couples who came together, families leading each other out to the yard on an evening that should have been a beautiful memory. This is not a case of 4 dead people. This is a case of 67 people attacked in one night, at a community party, with the very food they had cooked for each other. So what really happened, and how did the police know this was not an accident? When rescue forces arrived in the Sonobe area on the night of July 25, the first thing they thought of was common food poisoning. Summer, hot weather, food cooked from early morning, left out all day. There is no shortage of reasons for food to spoil, nothing logically unusual at first. But the scale was too large, the symptoms were too severe. People were not just having a mild stomach ache and going home to rest. People were convulsing, fainting, suffering from respiratory failure right on the spot, and those with experience in the emergency room that night knew right away that this was not something they usually saw in common food poisoning cases. The remaining curry samples were seized and taken for testing that very night. The test results would change the entire direction of the investigation, and it was not what any of them expected. The results came back: arsenic trioxide, industrial chemical arsenic. Not bacteria, not spoiled food, not an accident. Someone had deliberately put poison into the curry pot. Now, if you are not familiar with arsenic trioxide, let me explain quickly. This is an industrial poison used in insecticides, wood treatment, and certain manufacturing processes. Colorless, odorless, tasteless, dissolving completely in hot food without leaving any signs visible to the naked eye. The eater does not know until symptoms appear 30 to 60 minutes later. By then, it is too late to do anything else. And the dosage found in the curry pot that day was enough to kill hundreds of people, and 67 people ate from that curry pot. To put such a large amount of arsenic into a boiling pot of food, stir it until completely dissolved, then walk away as if nothing happened, requires calculation, requires preparation, and requires a person who knows exactly what they are doing. So who in this neighborhood could do that? And more importantly, who had a reason to do that? During the crime scene examination, investigators found a blue paper cup in the festival's trash can. Inside, there were traces of arsenic acid. This was the only piece of evidence at the scene, a paper cup, the kind everyone uses at festivals. The perpetrator used it to measure or mix the arsenic, then threw it into the trash can. The calm way the cup was thrown away, without haste, without panic, speaks volumes about the person who did this. Police began interviewing each of the 20 women who cooked the curry that day. There was only one central question: who had the opportunity to access the curry pots alone, long enough to put a large amount of arsenic in without being directly seen? Each person was verified, present at what time, standing where, doing what. The picture gradually emerged. And then something unusual surfaced. Among all those who participated in cooking and attended the festival that day, there was one person who did not get sick at all. Not luck, not a special constitution, but because that person knew they should not eat curry that night. And then a witness stepped forward. It was a 16-year-old teenage girl living in the Sonobe area. Public documents later only referred to her as Person A, her identity protected because she was a minor at the time. She told police that night, she saw a woman walking around the curry pots. Not a chance passing by, not stopping by to get food and leaving, but walking back and forth around the cooking area like a patrolling bear. That was how she described it. Other witnesses in the area further confirmed. That woman had been alone by the curry pots for more than 40 minutes. 40 minutes. I want you to pause at that number. 40 minutes alone by the boiling pots of food, while the whole neighborhood was gathering around. 40 minutes to do what? Enough time to put an amount of arsenic sufficient to kill hundreds of people into the boiling food pot, stirring it until completely dissolved. Her name is Masumi Hayashi, 37 years old. She had just celebrated her birthday exactly 3 days before the case occurred, on July 26, 1961. A mother of 4 children, living right in the Sonobe area, the same neighborhood as all the victims, the same neighborhood as Hirataka, as Miyuki, as Tananaka and Tanaka. Neighbor, acquaintance, someone who had stood next to Tananaka and Tanaka at neighborhood meetings, someone whose face and name everyone in the Sonobe area knew. Her husband, Kenji Hayashi, 53 years old, was a professional pest control worker, licensed to use and store toxic chemicals for his work, including arsenic, a normal family. But when police began to look closer, everything started to become unusual. Let me go through each piece of evidence one by one. The first piece. A witness saw Masumi walking around the curry pots. Alright, she lived in the area. Approaching the cooking area was not something unusual, completely explainable. The second piece, being alone for more than 40 minutes by the pots. Starting to be harder to explain, but still not enough to conclude anything. The third piece, the only person in the entire festival who did not get sick. This is the point I need your attention on. 67 people who ate curry that night were all affected to varying degrees, no exceptions. The only person who did not get sick was the person who did not eat the curry. Why didn't Masumi eat? The fourth piece, forensic analysis. When investigators seized chemical samples from Masumi and Kenji's house, the comparison results showed that the arsenic at their house had a chemical composition very similar to the arsenic found in the curry pot. The fifth piece, a legal supply of arsenic. Masumi's husband was a pest control worker. Storing arsenic in the house was completely normal for his profession, nothing suspicious, but that also meant Masumi could get arsenic at any time without needing to buy it from outside, without leaving any transactional traces. Now, I will tell you straight, no one saw Masumi put anything into the pot. There were no fingerprints on the blue paper cup. There were no cameras. The entire case was built on circumstantial evidence and forensic chemistry. And this is what her defense lawyer would emphasize throughout many years, many trials, and many appeals later. So why were the police so sure? The answer lies in what they found when looking into Masumi Hayashi's past. And that is when things truly became terrifying. Let's go back to the real person of Masumi Hayashi before she became a housewife in the Sonobe area. Before that, Masumi used to be a life insurance salesperson, and this is not a random detail. That job taught her to understand the system better than most people, knowing which contract pays money to whom, knowing what conditions need to be met to get paid, knowing what loopholes can be exploited. She and Kenji were accused of conspiring to forge insurance records. Kenji pretended to lose the ability to move his limbs to receive disability insurance money. Not once, multiple times. Multiple contracts signed with many different insurance companies, each time a new performance with a new victim being the companies themselves. The amount of fraud reached tens of millions of yen. Not a small number, not an impulsive act, but a plan systematically executed over many years, discovered, sued in court by insurance companies, exposed before the public, and that news spread in the Sonobe area. Neighbors began to shun the Hayashi family, not inviting them to gatherings, not communicating, not greeting them when meeting on the street, looking at them with eyes that anyone could recognize as eyes of contempt. The walls of Masumi's house were graffitied. The press began to appear in front of the house gates. The entire Hayashi family became the talk of the whole neighborhood, turned away by the entire neighborhood. Some people bowed their heads, accepted the consequences, and continued to live. Masumi Hayashi was clearly not that type of person. But the story of Masumi did not begin with the curry case, nor did it begin with the insurance fraud case. Within 10 years before the night of July 25, 1998, Masumi was prosecuted for 3 separate poisoning cases, all using arsenic, all targeting people with life insurance contracts, all following the same cold logic. Poison the victim dies or is severely disabled, the insurance beneficiary receives the money. Among those cases was even a male acquaintance, someone identified as Masumi's target because of the life insurance contract he held. And it didn't just stop at outsiders. Masumi was also suspected of trying to poison Kenji himself at least once. The husband she lived with every day, ate with every meal, slept with every night. Think about that for a moment. This was not a person who thought of using arsenic for the first time in a moment of despair or loss of control. This was a person who had done this multiple times, had calculated every step, was so proficient that she knew exactly what amount to use, how to mix it into food without being detected, and how to stand and watch the victim without revealing anything on her face. Arsenic was not something she accidentally came to know. It was a tool she had honed over many years, on many people, according to a process repeated enough times to become a habit. And on the evening of July 25, 1998, this time it was not one person, it was the whole neighborhood. So why? Why a community festival? Why a communal curry pot? Why 67 neighbors instead of a specific target with an insurance contract? Prosecutors argued that Masumi was angry because she was shunned and despised by the entire neighborhood after the insurance scandal. The community festival, where everyone was happy with each other while her family was marginalized, was the straw that broke the camel's back after years of accumulation. The second theory is even scarier. The curry case was also a large-scale insurance plot, poisoning many people at the same time, multiple insurance contracts activated in one night, more effective than anything she had done before. On October 4, 1998, exactly 3 months after the curry case, police arrested Masumi on charges related to a previous insurance poisoning case, while also arresting Kenji for insurance fraud. On December 9, 1998, Masumi was rearrested on official charges of murder and attempted mass murder in the curry case. On December 29, 1998, she was officially indicted at the Wakayama District Court. Masumi remained silent throughout the entire investigation process, not answering questions, not explaining, not cooperating. When she spoke up, she pled guilty to insurance fraud, admitting that part without hesitation, but all murder charges she denied completely, absolutely, without wavering once, without changing her stance once. The trial of Masumi Hayashi opened on May 13, 1999, at the Wakayama District Court, nearly a year after the July 1998 festival night. Before that, on October 20, 2000, Kenji Hayashi was sentenced to 6 years in prison for insurance fraud. On December 11, 2002, after more than 3 years of trial, presiding judge Ikuo Ogawa pronounced the verdict. Masumi Hayashi was guilty in 7 cases out of 8 cases prosecuted, including the curry case and insurance-related poisoning cases. She was sentenced to death. But this is a detail I need you to notice, because it says a lot of things. Judge Ogawa took 7 hours to read through the 200-page verdict. 7 hours. For comparison, a normal verdict in criminal cases in Japan usually takes only a few dozen minutes. 7 hours is not the number of a clear verdict. 7 hours is the number of a court trying to explain in legal language what they could not prove with direct evidence. The complexity, the careful consideration, and perhaps also the uncertainty. Judge Ogawa declared, 3 independent tests on arsenic samples found at the Hayashi home all gave the same results, matching the arsenic in the curry pot. The court's central argument revolved around 3 points. Masumi was the only person who did not get sick that night. The arsenic at her house matched the chemical composition of the arsenic in the curry pot, and her 10-year history of poisoning showed what the court called a deep-seated criminal nature. The defense team appealed immediately. There was no direct evidence, it was all circumstantial, and the arsenic samples were mishandled during the investigation process. On June 28, 2005, the Osaka High Court reviewed the entire file and ruled, uphold the death sentence. Masumi broke her years-long silence at this session, speaking up before the court once again declaring her innocence. The court did not change. On April 21, 2009, the Supreme Court of Japan rejected the final appeal. Judge Kohei Nasu announced the verdict. Although there was no direct evidence, the entirety of the circumstantial evidence, including a very high concentration of arsenic found in Masumi's own hair, evidence showing she had direct contact with arsenic at the exact time the case occurred, proved to the extent of excluding all reasonable doubt that she was the only person who had the opportunity to put arsenic into the curry pot. The verdict explicitly stated, "The criminal responsibility of the defendant is extremely serious. The court has no choice but to approve the death sentence." The death sentence officially took effect. 11 years, from the festival night in July 1998 to the day the Supreme Court closed the final door, and Masumi still said she was innocent. In July 2009, in the very year the Supreme Court ruled, Masumi filed her first petition for a retrial. In March 2017, 8 years later, the Wakayama District Court rejected it. In April 2017, Masumi appealed to the Osaka High Court, rejected. In June 2021, she filed a third petition, this time directly attacking forensic chemistry itself, attacking the sole foundation upon which the entire verdict stands. As of early 2026, that petition still has no results. To understand why this path is so difficult, Japan's retrial system is called the door that cannot be opened by domestic lawyers. In the entire post-war history, only exactly 5 death row inmates have been successfully retried, and all 5 ended in acquittal. But in 2024, Iwao Hakamada, the person who sat on death row the longest in the world with 48 years, was exonerated after the court determined that the forensic evidence in his case had been fabricated. A Japanese court for the first time in modern history overturned a death sentence built entirely on problematic circumstantial evidence. That precedent exists. Whether it is enough to open the door for Masumi Hayashi or not, that is the question her family is still waiting for an answer to, while time stands still for no one among them. The Wakayama curry case did not just kill 4 people and injure 63 people in one night. It did something bigger. It shattered trust. Across Japan, a wave of copycat poisonings erupted right after the case was widely reported. People began putting poison into canned drinks, public food, neighbors' food. A man passed away after drinking canned tea laced with cyanide. Japanese people, who absolutely trusted the culture of sharing community meals, the communal food pot at festivals, the hands of the neighbor who cooked for them, suddenly looked at all those things with different eyes. In 1999, the television drama Kori no Sekai was born, directly inspired by the case, starring Yutaka Takanouchi and Nanako Matsushima, Masumi Hayashi. But crime never stops at the perpetrator. Masumi's son, using the alias Koji to protect himself, currently 37 years old, working as a truck driver in Wakayama, has lived in the shadow of the Hayashi name for 26 years. An engagement was canceled because the other party found out whose son he was. Messages from strangers online wishing him dead. He is not sure his mother is innocent, but he said, "All I want is the truth. A retrial is the only way to get that." On June 9, 2021, Masumi's eldest daughter, 37 years old, jumped off a bridge at Kansai Airport, bringing about the death of her 4-year-old daughter, who was in her arms. On that same day, another 16-year-old grandchild was found dead, all on the same day. Kenji, 79 years old, in a wheelchair after a cerebral hemorrhage, his body reaching its limit, still does not stop. As easy as a camel passing through the eye of a needle, but giving up will crush my son. And Masumi, in her cell writing letters to Koji, "You are my treasure. Thanks to you, I have survived 26 years here." Masumi Hayashi, 63 years old, 26 years in a cell, still says she is innocent. If she is guilty, this is one of the most public, daring, and cold-blooded murders in the history of Japanese justice. A mother of 4 children deliberately poisoning the entire neighborhood, killing 2 children, standing and watching her neighbors collapse before her eyes without trembling hands, then throwing the paper cup into the trash can and walking away. If she is innocent, then the person who really put arsenic into the curry pot that night has never been found. That person has lived free for 26 years, and may still be living free right now. Whichever way, the answer is equally terrifying. That is all I have for you today about the Masumi Hayashi case, a case that after 26 years still has no truly satisfactory answer for anyone. The Masumi Hayashi case. After everything we have just gone through together, I confess that this is not an easy case to tell. Not because it is legally complex, but because whichever way you look at it, it is heartbreaking. Hirotaka, 10 years old. Miyuki, 16 years old. 2 children who just went to a summer festival and never returned. I don't have enough words to speak about that, because there are losses that language cannot touch. But if there is one thing I want you to carry with you after watching this video, it is the names of the victims. Hirotaka Hayashi, Miyuki Tori, Takatoshi Taninaka, Takaaki Tanaka. 4 people who went to a normal evening and never came home. Crime never just takes away those who died. It takes away those who are still alive. People like Koji, who spent his youth fighting for a truth he is not even sure of what it is. To the families of all the victims, both those who have passed away and those who continue to live with that loss, I offer my sincere condolences. Thank you for staying until the very end. That means more than you think. If you found this video worth watching, please leave a like and hit subscribe so you don't miss the next stories.